My name is Maureen Conway, and I am a vice president at the Aspen Institute and the executive director of the Economic Opportunities Program. And I am not Shelley Stewart, so I am clearly on the wrong page. Here I am. Okay. So it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's conversation, How Benefits Make Jobs Better. This conversation is part of the Economic Opportunities Program ongoing Opportunity in America discussion series in which we explore the changing state of economic opportunity in the United States, what it means for workers, businesses, and communities, and idea for change that promotes shared prosperity and advances a more free, more just, and more equitable society. Please also note, we're going to have another event in this series on January 24th. We'll host Nick Romeo, author and journalist at The New Yorker, to discuss his new book, The Alternative, How to Build a Just Economy. So you can register on our website for that, and the link is in the chat for you. For those of you online. And so speaking of those of you online, where most people are, given the dreadful weather here in DC today, let's do a very quick review of our technology. All attendees online are muted, but we very much welcome questions. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit and upvote questions. We also know that many people in our audience have a lot to share. So if you're online, you can share resources and other ideas in the chat. We love to see sort of what everybody else is working on. Also pleased that we have resources to share today. So if you didn't see them, if you're in the room, they were on the resource table. We just have out our Benefits Beyond Measure. Shelley will be talking about that a little bit later. And I'm happy that our colleagues at Coastal Enterprise also brought some of their resources. And there's another report. I'm sure Betsy will say more about it, but please avail yourself of those resources. Okay. We also will have a feedback. There's a feedback survey on the table as well, and there'll be a feedback survey that pops up for everybody online at the end of the session. We love to get your feedback. Please do give us feedback. And you can also email us at eop.program@aspeninstitute.org. We're always trying to do better, so please let us know what you think. We encourage you to post about this conversation on the social media platform of your choice. Our hashtag is TalkOpportunity. If you have any technical issues, please contact us at eop.program@aspeninstitute.org, or you can use the chat if that still works. We will be recording this event and sharing it via email after the event, and it will be posted on our website. And closed captions are available for people joining online. Please click the CC button at the bottom of your screen. Okay, so today we're talking about workplace benefits. That's non-cash compensation offered to workers, including health insurance, retirement savings, paid time off, like many of us may have recently enjoyed over the holidays, gym memberships, and more. Benefits can play a key role in workers' ability to achieve economic stability and pursue mobility. But our system of benefits, it's kind of patchwork, complicated, and it presents a lot of challenges to a variety of workers and businesses who are, trying to sort of patch things together, and they have widely varying experiences and perspectives regarding the quality and sufficiency of benefits today. So we need to kind of start building a more shared understanding of benefits and the role benefits plays in creating good jobs, to think about how do we address some of these systemic issues in our benefit system? How do we improve issues of equity? And how can we build a system of benefits that allows good jobs for all? So that's what we're hoping to think about today. We have a great panel of folks to dive into all these issues. But before we start, I'm really pleased that we're going to hear about some research our team has been doing. I showed you that brief before on benefits and the challenges workers face accessing them. And it is my pleasure to introduce the director of EOP's Future of Work initiative for the next 4 days at least, Shelley Stewart. And because this is the last event I get to introduce Shelley, at least in that capacity, I do want to thank her for all the work that she's done with the Aspen Institute. Shelley came to the Aspen Institute 6.5 years ago with a freshly minted PhD in sociology from Berkeley. and experience kind of researching issues of technology and how technology is shaping work and the issues facing workers. She brought her brilliance, her research knowledge, her incredible commitment to equity, economic justice, and really just improving human lives to the work she does here at the Aspen Institute. And, she's just made so many contributions. We are so grateful for all the work that Shelley has done. We're so grateful for her collegiality, for the many ways she pitched in, for the odd talents that she revealed at various points along the way, although she never did give us a concert on that accordion, but we'll take a rain check. But she's just done so much for us, for our team. So it's a bittersweet introduction, but we're thrilled that she's going to be joining the Workers Lab to build a participatory research center there. So we're excited about opportunities to partner in new ways. So Shelley, thank you so much, and let me welcome you to the podium.
Thank you so much, Maureen.
You're not doing the podium, okay.
Oh, no, I'm going to stay right here. Thank you for that introduction. It is my last event on behalf of Aspen, but all the more reason to be full of gratitude for all of you for being here, to our panel for joining us. I think it'll be a really great conversation we'll have today. So, as Maureen said, I direct the Future of Work initiative at the Aspen Institute Economic Opportunities Program, and our team has worked for several years, but especially for the last year, on really understanding how workplace benefits can contribute to job quality and uplift workers, provide them with better lives, more security for their lives, their families, and their futures. And so what I'll be sharing to start us off is some findings from some focus groups that we did with workers. And these were done at 4 different small businesses around the country, representing both in-person and remote workers with incomes ranging from about $20,000 a year to $200,000 a year, and coming from a whole range of racial, ethnic, and gender identities, as well as a range of family structures. So single folks, married folks, families with young children, families with older children. So to really capture kind of all of the different life stages that people are at as they're working. And we talked with them about the benefits they receive. What do they receive? What gaps are there? And what are their experiences? And a real interest was in how specific administration choices that businesses can make a difference. The whole system of benefits, as we'll hear a lot about today, is really complex. There's a lot of different entry points for the conversation, whether that's policy, whether that's with the people who design the benefits and products, whether that's the businesses who, administer them to workers. And so we were focusing on that last piece. And so that's what I'll share a bit about to ground us in the comments and challenges of those workers that we talked to. And so one thing we found that, what works, what's going well, is that by and large, the vast number of workers really appreciated their HR departments and the human connections they were able to have. So regardless of the systems and as challenging as certain benefits may have been, people appreciated the human connections and having a place to turn. They found the people employed by their employer to help them were awesome, good, kind, were all words that were used repeatedly. Folks appreciated being able to have a conversation, even when things were hard and even when there wasn't an answer or a good or favorable answer. People appreciated being able to engage and feeling like they were able to talk to a person and a person who understood their situation and their employer. And then there were some challenges, some needs, some gaps that arose. And again, these came through across the different income levels and around the country. And the biggest was that the systems tend to be really complex and even within an employer, really numerous. People felt that there were different systems for health insurance, for paid time off, for retirement planning, and for other benefits when those were offered. And that there wasn't a single place to find the information about these different offerings. People described navigating all of these different landscapes as a second job in order to utilize the benefits that were rightfully theirs as part of their compensation and that their employers were paying for. But that getting from being offered it to being able to really utilize it felt like a huge hurdle to folks. People said things like, I'm not even really exactly sure what's offered. I kind of know it's there. That wasn't very helpful to them. They couldn't utilize those benefits. And others said, I really wish there was a clearer way to get the information about exactly what our benefits are and how I personally can use them. People also spoke about having conflicting information in different places. They may go to one portal and hear one thing. They may go to an employee handbook and read another thing, and that was challenging. And when then they went to the HR folks who they spoke so highly of, those people felt burdened by how many of these questions they were getting. And so that complexity was a real challenge. And then the second thing that almost every group that we ran spoke about was a desire for more input and transparency into decisions about what benefits are offered and how eligibility is set up. So one person said, I've never been provided with the opportunity to give my input for the type of benefits offered to us. Another said, I think this is the first time that I've been asked in recent memory to give my opinion about my benefits. And that was said about the research focus group that we were doing. Folks suggested potentially having surveys where they could express interests in different benefits and priorities that they had. And others spoke about potential for involvement in decision-making, such as being able to vote on different benefits, different providers for the benefits that they received. Lastly, I'll just highlight a couple things about specific benefits. We spoke about the huge range of products that benefits can be and how those are different systems. And each one we could have a week-long conference about. But each of our groups focused on either paid time off, healthcare, or training as a benefit. So with paid time off, one of the leading things that came up was the challenges workers experienced with one-pot systems. These are systems where people have time off. It can be used for any purpose, whether that's medical, family, or vacation type uses. Most folks that we talked to found this to be challenging. For one, it caused illness or family disruptions to then lead to canceling vacation plans and relaxation plans. And people had a hard time with this. One described, having to take a week off because they couldn't get out of bed because they were sick. That led to canceling an entire vacation that had been planned for years. And that was really, really challenging. The other challenge people spoke of with that was around public health and feeling as though they needed to go to work when they were sick in order to not give up their vacation. So that was something that came up in several of the groups as well. There were also, with time off, concerns around culture and feasibility beyond specifically what was offered. So folks we talked to said that when supervisors rarely took time off, or if they regularly checked in while they were away, it led to some concerns and fear that taking time off was really okay, or that it would be seen negatively during performance reviews. Others talked about ways that calendars and expectations made taking time off very difficult. If they were expected, say, to sell a certain number of products and there was no consideration for their monthly totals, if they had taken time off or not, then there was pressure to not take the time off, even if it was technically available. When it came to healthcare, the biggest concern was cost. This was the amount that workers were having to contribute from their paychecks. And generally, there was a lot of awareness that this was a shared challenge, that employers were facing the same challenge, and it was rooted in rising costs of health insurance rather than decisions being made by employers. This was especially a concern for families, knowing that providing the cost of healthcare for a family is incredibly expensive. And employers were having to make decisions between offering that and contributing that money to other aspects of their business and other forms of compensation. And then lastly, with training, some of the challenges here really resonated with work done by Economic Opportunities Programs Upskill around the challenges of a reimbursement model and the need for more clarity around pathways and how training leads to better outcomes for workers. So please check out our report for more information and insights into this. But we get to transition a bit and take a broader perspective. So, those were some findings from a handful of workers around the country at 4 businesses. And now we get to hear from an entire panel with some really diverse perspectives to kind of broaden the aperture about this conversation around benefits. So it is an honor and privilege to have all of you on our panel today. I'll put names to faces here, but please check out all of these folks' bios on our webpage. They're far too impressive to summarize here, but we have Betsy Beeman, CEO of Coastal Enterprises, Inc., and you're located up in Maine. Then we have Tanya Hallett, Vice President for People Experience Technology at Amazon Stores. Then we have Emily Martin, Chief Program Officer for the National Women's Law Center. And then on the end, we have Dr. Angie Kim, President and CEO of the Center for Cultural Innovation, here today with us from California. So to start the conversation today, I'd like to ask each of you to just introduce yourself in your own words, tell us a little bit about what you do, and share your perspective about why this conversation on benefits is important. And Tanya, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, sure. Hello. Okay. Hello. Well, it is certainly a pleasure to be here with you all. As you said, I work for Amazon with Amazon Stores. I'm the Vice President of People Experience and Technology, also in some ways known as Human Resources. Amazon Stores is primarily our global retail business that houses everything we do to deliver for you all a plethora of products and services. We are extremely customer obsessed, and it includes everything from our grocery business, our healthcare business, as well as the Amazon.com that I hope that you all engage with. I've been with Amazon for about 3 years, just over. And prior to that, I was in automotive for most of my career with General Motors. And throughout my career, I've worked in hourly employment, labor relations. I've worked globally. I've been a part of local and national negotiations. And just with both employers, just really privileged to be at this intersection where employees and employers get to really impact an individual, their lives, and quite frankly, their community. Really, really proud and feel privileged to be here with you all representing Amazon. This conversation around employee benefits is crucial for us. We are customer obsessed. We are also employee obsessed. And we believe that in order to recruit and attract great people, great talent, we need to be able to offer great jobs that have great benefits. And so as we go into this conversation about how we're thinking about doing it, the point that will be pervasive for us is inclusiveness, because we fully understand our scale and our scope. And that means that we have many different types of people at different points in their lives that are coming to us, and their priorities for their health needs, their needs overall, is what we need to be able to address. So in being inclusive, we hope to do that by offering packages that are comprehensive, that are high quality, and that and offer us an opportunity to continue to experiment and innovate. So again, thank you for having us here.
Thanks so much. Emily, I'll go to you next.
Hello. Great to be here. Again, I'm Emily Martin, and I'm the Chief Program Officer at the National Women's Law Center. The National Women's Law Center is based here in D.C., and for about 50 years, we have been a gender justice policy and legal organization working at the federal level and in the states across the range of issues that are important to the lives of women and girls. Immediately prior to my current role, by which I mean last month, I was the Vice President for Education education and workplace justice. And part of our work around workplace justice, in addition to thinking about things like sexual harassment and equal pay and discrimination protections, has been a real focus on job quality, from fair scheduling to a decent minimum wage to paid leave and paid sick days. And one of the reasons that I think that this conversation about benefits is so important is because when we talk about job quality, which of course is very much a benefits conversation, we're talking about gender justice and racial justice, because women are almost 2/3 of those in the lowest paid jobs in our economy. Those are the jobs that are, of course, least likely to have benefits. Women of all races are overrepresented in those jobs, but Black and brown women are especially overrepresented. And given that women continue to shoulder outsized family caregiving responsibilities, those factors come together to mean that women, and especially women of color, are at really increased risk of poverty in this country. And so when we talk about things like paid leave and retirement benefits and comprehensive affordable health insurance, one of the things that we are talking about is how to end that, how to change that, how to really move forward in creating an economy that is more equitable and that works for everybody and gives everybody a fair shot. So I'm really glad to be in conversation with all of you today.
Thank you. And Betsy.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here and to see some familiar faces in the audience, and I'm sure online as well. I'm Betsy Beeman. I'm the CEO of Coastal Enterprises, or CEI. We're based in Brunswick, Maine, and we're a nonprofit organization that's called a community development financial institution. And what that really means is that we're working to build a more just, climate resilient, and vibrant future for people in Maine and in rural regions around the country. And we do it by integrating financing, business advising, and policy solutions that help make our economy work more equitably. For a quick sense of scale, last year we made over 100 loans to small businesses, and we coached over 2,800 entrepreneurs and people who wanted to start a company. And most of those folks are people who are typically left behind and shut out of or new to our financial system. The majority were women or people with low incomes, and they included people of color, immigrants and refugees, veterans, and people with disabilities. I think it's part of the reason it's important that we're here on the panel is that over half of Americans work for small businesses. The average size of a business that we work with is 7 employees. So if we can't make a dent in figuring out how small businesses can provide good jobs and including benefits, then we're not going to really be able to address this issue across the country. An approach that we've used working with small business is a framework that we call our Good Jobs Framework. And I'll just give a little information about it. That's what's on the little handout that's on the table, or I think in the chat for folks who are remotely participating. It's a sort of a scorecard and a set of tools that we use to assess the quality of jobs at a particular small business, and it really provides a foundation or a basis for our work with them. We look at several factors, do the frontline workers in that small business, are they paid a living wage? And we use the MIT living wage calculator for every county in the country to figure that out. Secondly, sort of basic benefits, and we focus on paid time off, health benefits, and retirement savings, because it's important to build wealth as well as decent incomes. And third, a fair and engaging workplace, which for us includes schedule notice, which I'll talk about a little bit later, the importance of that, a sort of an annual assessment process that enables someone to get an increase in wages over time, as well as access to skilled training. And so last year we worked with over 90 businesses, helping them improve different aspects of their jobs. And we'll be talking some about that later. But I'm just fundamentally excited to be here because I believe that everyone in the U.S. who wants to work should be able to access a good quality job, and really fundamentally believe that good jobs are not only good for the workers, they're good for the businesses and ultimately good for our communities. So thanks for having me here. And I'll be waiting to hear the accordion playing at the end.
I'll just whip it out from behind me. Doesn't take up a lot of room.
There you go.
And last but not least, Angie.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. I'm Angie Kim. I'm the president and CEO of the Center for Cultural Innovation. We're headquartered in Los Angeles, but we work nationally and in the U.S. territories. Our focus historically since the nonprofit's founding has been to support artists in our community. And under my leadership, we've really broadened the lens of what we mean by creatives in our workforce. So solo entrepreneurs who might be anything from architects to tattoo artists who are running their own businesses. So solo entrepreneurs, gig workers, people who don't maybe get a paycheck in a traditional way. Certainly that means they are also outside of traditional employment arrangements, wherein therefore they are also lacking in benefits and protections. And so one of the things that we have started to embark on just a couple years ago is to really try to build relationships with a lot of different movement and nonprofit intermediary leaders of gig workers across all different sectors. And one of the things that we've learned is that artists show up in every sector. They are domestic workers. They are agricultural workers. They are migrant workers. They are also neurodiverse and diverse in terms of disability and ability, which puts them sometimes in unconventional work and income arrangements. So all of that just to say that one of the things that really happened during COVID was we all became collectively aware of how much we depend on all these independent types of workers as essential, and who also fall outside of our systems of providing social safety net protections. And so protections that provide legal recourse against discrimination or wage theft, all the way to the kinds of benefits that employees, full-time employees, really are able to take advantage of to accrue paid leave, accrue retirement savings, sometimes also comes with financial literacy benefits, which again, people who are gig employed, under the table, or just working independently would love to have access to all of those kinds of things. When every worker can actually access those kinds of benefits and protections, our argument is our collective economy is more stable and secure. And so my voice, I think, is here to represent that of the gig worker.
Great. I'm so glad we have so many different perspectives to learn from and hear perspectives and insights from. And Emily, I'd like to start with you as we dive into some of the current challenges and opportunities. So could you talk to us about the role of policy in the area of workplace benefits and some of the trends that you see around the country?
Sure. Well, at a basic level, policy is so important because really what working people need is remarkably consistent across industry, across employment type, across income. People want to be able to access high quality, affordable health care. They want to be able to care for themselves and their families. They want to be able to retire with dignity. And without baseline legal requirements and policy structures to enable that to happen, so many people are going to be left out because of the huge range of employer size and employer resources and employer willingness, because of the huge range of bargaining power that individual employees have in seeking these protections. It's also the case that without policy, a lot of the solutions that are available are just going to fall short. So, for example, when we think about paid leave, employers can and do provide paid leave on their own, but for this to really be a comprehensive, widely available program that every worker can access, whether they're a gig worker or whether they're a traditional employee, and regardless of whether it's a small employer or a large employer, you really need something more like a social insurance system that everybody pays into and can draw from. It isn't really a thing that is fixable on an employer by employer level. Similarly, that's why the Affordable Care Act was so important in creating the exchanges and Medicaid expansion and suddenly making health coverage much more available outside the traditional employer-employee relationship and not having it all turn on the particular circumstances of your employer. So policy is really important for creating benefit solutions that work and that work at scale. And it's really important that we do that for some of the reasons that I already started to talk about, that when we're looking at lower paid jobs, at the jobs in the lowest paid quarter of our economy, these are the jobs where there is especially limited access to benefits now. Only about 14% of workers in that lowest quarter of the economy have access to paid leave, for example. When we look at paid sick days, if you look at the very, very lowest paid jobs, the lowest 10th, a majority of folks have not a single paid sick day. It's a similar story with retirement benefits and with employer provided health coverage. And so in order to ensure that those large swaths of workers in our country who sort of by definition are going to have less bargaining power than the higher paid employees in a company, to ensure that there is consistent access to these really basic or life-sustaining benefits, policy solutions are really necessary. And I guess the other couple things I will say is that COVID really demonstrated that we have the capacity to come up with policy solutions when we are motivated to do so, as the federal government for the first time required some level of paid leave and paid sick day protection, which had never happened before, as well as making huge investments in childcare, which really enabled the childcare industry to stay afloat. And then all of those have come to an end. So I think right now we are seeing, we are being held to really take stock of the fact that these are policy choices not to provide these benefits, given that we have in very recent history demonstrated that it is possible. But on the positive side, we are seeing innovations at the state level that I think make clear that it's a question not if, but when we will see these protections at the federal level as well. So for paid family leave, just since 2020, Colorado, Maryland, Delaware, Minnesota, and Maine have enacted paid family leave. We've seen important innovations in fair scheduling policies in cities around the country over the past year. We've also seen states investing in childcare to try to make up for the loss of federal dollars earlier in 2023. And so that is exciting that states are actually working as laboratories here and pointing the way to where hopefully we will all get sooner rather than later.
Thank you so much. And for folks who are interested in some of the scheduling practice legislation, we hosted a conversation just in November about some of those approaches. So be sure to check that out if you're interested. And Betsy, let's talk small businesses. So what are some of the challenges that you've seen small businesses face in providing benefits to their workers?
Well, the first one you actually touched on at the beginning of your description of your recent survey about benefits, and you noted how people really appreciated their HR departments. Well, one of the challenges of most small businesses is there is no HR department. A lot of, small business owners, on the companies that we're working with that have perhaps an average of 7 employees, typically one of those people is not yet an HR director or resource. folks start small businesses for many reasons. There may be a great baker, or they may want to work out on the water because that's, where they grew up. And they then start a bakery or they start a mussel farm, but they don't necessarily know how to run a bakery or a mussel farm and how to hire folks and really sort of navigate the complex policies and programs that are out there. So, and what we find is that actually most small businesses in rural regions, anyway, they'd like to offer decent benefits to their employees. Their employees are often their neighbors, their community members, their kids go to school together. But what they don't have necessarily is access to information and the resources and the knowledge. And so our business advisors can work with them to help introduce them to sort of simple or help them navigate the more complex options that are out there. And then as they start, then they realize, oh, that's actually not so hard, or, oh, that's actually not that expensive. And then over time, as their business grows, as they have, frankly, more revenues and start to earn profits, they're able to add on. And they see the connection between the benefits and job qualities that they're offering and the productivity of their workers and how that benefits both their employees as well as their business. The second obvious challenge is cost, but in some cases it's also perceived cost, not necessarily actual cost. There's a cost to not providing good jobs and good benefits, and that is typically high turnover, vacancies on your staff, not being able to achieve your business plan as a result. And we've actually developed a tool that helps an employer figure out what the actual cost of their turnover is, and then to say, okay, how could you use those resources differently to invest in better quality jobs that then help your company to thrive? So how do we help small businesses around this? We help them to configure benefits that they can afford today, and then as their company grows and is more profitable, to add more. Perhaps a startup business can't provide access to health insurance, but maybe they can provide a stipend using the Qualified Small Employer HRA. And that's something they can budget and dedicate before tax money to on a monthly basis. They say, okay, we can provide $50 or $100 per employee, and then that employee can use those resources to either cover the costs of being on their spouse's plan or to reimburse health-related expenses. And again, over time then, perhaps as that business grows and they can provide more sort of comprehensive health insurance. There are other benefits, and I think you mentioned them, like schedule notice, that really cost almost nothing in most cases, but can have real financial and non-financial benefits for folks. Providing 2 weeks of schedule notice enables a worker to plan for their childcare or their elder care, their transportation in ways that can save them money and reduce stress. If it's their second job, it helps them figure out how much time will they have available for their other job. If their job has a variable schedule, it helps them budget and figure out, okay, I know how much I'm going to earn over the next 2 weeks. That helps me to organize my life. And then for the employer, it can help them to improve employee retention as well as be part of their recruitment for new workers to say, gee, we provide X, Y, and Z and 2 week schedule notice.
Great. And then on the other side of the business size spectrum, Tanya, Amazon is one of the largest companies in the world. So could you give us a little more insight into what it's like providing benefits for such a large and diverse workforce?
It is certainly an opportunity, one that we've really enjoyed leaning into, how we figure out how to create diversity of choice and flexibility when we think about being so large and having so many different employees. Working backwards from our customers is how we've gotten to be the company that we are. And so we use that same mental model to work backwards from our employees. And so when I think about some of the challenges, there are many. Some of them have been called out, whether from a policy perspective or, as you mentioned, around choice. But the two that come to mind for me is employees having access and understanding what the benefits are, and then addressing the diversity. So when we think about employees having access, what we do know is that more than half of our employees, especially in our operational fields that come to work for us, have been unemployed or underemployed. And so in that instance, they may never have had an experience with an employer-sponsored benefit program, or it may have been a long time since that. So as you called out in your research, just navigating what are these choices, what are the trade-offs, how should I make the elections is something that we see as an opportunity for us, because we're investing a lot of research, resources, and dollars in being and having a program that has depth and breadth, right? So it's important that they understand the opportunities. From an inclusive perspective, we have an app that we use to communicate with our employees, corporate employees, as well as our field employees. We know that over 95% of our employees go there as a means to learn about things related to their employment. For an operations or fulfillment employee, they're going to check their schedule out in advance. They're going to check their pay. And so we've now used that as a mechanism to nudge and to remind them during periods of open enrollment, and also to offer nudges around with educational information around how to make benefit elections. Traditionally, and I can recall getting the email or the paper mail that says, go to this website, and then you'll kind of go through prompts to get to a point. We've acknowledged that many of our workers are not going to go do that. So why not go to a place that we know they're going to be super interested in going on a regular basis, which is to that app. So we've been using that, and we've seen a great uptick. We're very optimistic about the engagement that we're seeing and how people are actually taking advantage of the benefits that we're investing in for them. The other piece is diversity. We're certainly talking about, from a U.S. perspective, but we're a global employer. And so when we think about all of the employees that have interests and have priorities and have needs when it comes to benefits, we want to have depth and breadth, as I mentioned before. We have employees that are coming to us, and it's their first professional job. We have employees that are choosing to be with us on a seasonal basis, and so they have certain needs. We have employees that are choosing us as a second career that's kind of later in their life. And so how do we meet those employees and their needs? We have native-born employees. We have foreign employees. And so when we think about all of that, again, it's going deep. It's being really comprehensive. It's choosing to continue to make the investment. We do believe that investing in these benefit offerings is another way of signaling to our employees that their experience, their overall package with us matters for us to retain them. And so that's where we are. The other thing that I love is that we are watching states that are experimenting, because we do believe that sometimes we need to be scrappy. We need to experiment as we're listening to and seeing where there are opportunities, where there are gaps that need to be filled. And we do have, the opportunity, given how broad we are and how many different industries we're operating in, to learn and try some things to see what works. So those are the challenges that we're looking at.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And so we've heard about benefits for employees at small employers, large employers. Angie, what about folks who don't have an employer at all? What can you tell us about the state of benefits for those folks?
Paltry at best. So, these are folks that until COVID hit, that the federal government, state governments, municipalities did not even recognize as workers when we talk about gig workers. So they are kind of this invisible workforce by and large, but we all know gig workers. I think when I first entered a professional status and got a job, et cetera, I was in that generation where it was sort of this weird moment where people talked about how my predecessors could stay at a single job, right? A single employer. My generation, younger generations, that is clearly not the case. there is a particular group of people where they will go from employer to employer and they will have benefits at every single one of those jobs. That's great. Unfortunately, that's a pretty homogenous group. And so even for those who are not necessarily gig workers, what is the safety net protection for those who might want more flexibility than going from employer to employer, or if that's just not in their cards? And so for us, what our vision is that we would love to have a country where everyone gets protections and benefits. We are a long way from there, but I will say the discourse, particularly in the last few years, has actually turned and I think has created a lot of opportunities to actually recognize that income that is earned make you a worker no matter if you have a traditional employer, right? And so also acknowledging how much we depend on care providers, people who may do that professionally, of course, for instance, doulas, but also who do that personally and get nothing acknowledged in terms of benefits and protections. And yet we have as a country acknowledged in the last few years that they are an essential part of how we have a resilient and strong community, cultural, social, and economic infrastructure. So all of those things, discourse-wise, is opening the door for, I think at this moment, really interesting experimentation around how can we expand who gets included in the safety net and how do we expand the social safety net so that the safety net and the contract that used to be between only employers and employees, like, okay, employees, you do something for us. Now, as an employer, we need to make it competitive to retain you and do something for you. How do we expand that to acknowledge all people work and contribute? There are, people have mentioned here, there are interesting state level experimentations. I definitely think that's where the juice is right now. I live in a state that has started to experiment with portable retirement benefits. That right now is still conferred to only those who are going from employer to employer and not necessarily for independent workers. But there are, those create these bright spots of opportunity to say, how can we expand that? I think there's also interesting experimentation and for the large part, still a lot of talk and discussion, but I think we're right on the cusp of like, how do we have pooled risk funds that might aggregate, for instance, sick leave protection or family leave protection for those who earn income through independent means. So there's a lot of experimentation that way. The other thing that I think is also really fascinating is just also a lens, maybe a policy lens on what does it mean to give workers more power. I think one of the things that we forget about when we talk only about protections and benefits is that these are kind of this tactical way of protecting the worker and therefore Americans writ large. The other thing, though, is just also this mindset shift about shifting power. Progressive Party, by and large, has really been on the side of the worker. How do we also make that tangible to talking about independent workers as also someone who could become powerful voices politically? And right now that hasn't been the case because they're not unionized. And so we look, one of our grantees is the Debt Collective, and they've done so much work to demonstrate what is possible to collectivize individuals who are without a single employer to negotiate with, but rather they are collectivized in political voice because they have a common identity, which is that they are all burdened by student loan debt. And so they Debt Collective as an organization has gone toe to toe with Department of Education and had some major wins and has been has had the ear of the Biden-Harris administration on what to do policy-wise around debt jubilees, et cetera. And I just give that as an example of right now, a lot of examples around how we are trying to shift ownership, governance power, political power to workers. And the last thing I'll say, just as an interesting example, is we're also watching in fascination as a bunch of baby boomers are leaving their jobs, right, as solo owners of small businesses or now mid-sized businesses. Places like in Minnesota where this is really taken off is how do they exit their ownership to the employees, to the workers? And so I guess I will just end this part to just say that one of the things that when we talk about protections for everyone, and I give you these examples of all of these different kinds of possibilities, what we're really talking about is how do we have companies and workers be better for their communities and create more stability and vibrancy and just basically well-being for everyone. I think all of those examples would create a lot more opportunities for everyone, regardless of the nature of where their income comes from.
Great. And that is a great transition to kind of the next section of our conversation around where is their hope? Where is their promise for what's next? So Betsy, coming back to you, could you tell us a story about a business that you've worked with where they were able to add benefits and what that looked like?
Sure. So I know one often talks about sort of white collar work in these kinds of environments. A lot of rural businesses are different. And I'll talk a little bit about Short Creek Farm, which is a company that was founded almost 10 years ago by some high school buddies. And it's a farm that produces grass-fed pork and beef. And they sort of are different than some of the other farms in the area in that they also manufacture value-added products like sausages, smoked meats, and dry salami, a lot of which include local or sort of seasonal ingredients, which sort of make them really special and wonderful products. So a couple years ago, we made a $400,000 loan to this small business to open up an USDA standard processing plant in Kennebunk, Maine. So their original company's in New Hampshire, but this processing plant was going to be in Maine. And at the time of that investment, they had 4 employees on the farm. They were earning $12 an hour, which is 35% below the living wage in Kennebunk, which is nearby, but in a different county, where this new facility was going to be. And they were providing no traditional benefits. And the business owner was a little concerned. It was this new community in Kennebunk. It had a tighter labor market, and he was going to need to hire 9 people at about the same time because it was going to be a production line. So he needed a couple meat packers and meat cutters, and they all needed to start at the same time because you can't have someone cutting the meat and not packaging it. So he had this challenge of how am I going to get 9 people sort of all at once in a tighter labor market. And so our workforce advisor, talked to him first about paid time off. And he's like, gee, that's really difficult because we have an assembly line. And if you have somebody who's off, like that doesn't work. But we could talk to him about the seasonality of that work. They have less work in January and February than the rest of the year. So he realized, okay, I can start by providing paid time off in that sort of downtime of the year, because that's a time when my business can do that. So again, that's not the paid time off that would be all year round, but it gets a company to start to do something that can be meaningful to employees. And that then was, so he actually started that with the farming staff in New Hampshire because it was going to take a while for him to actually to construct the processing plant. So next we talked about, if you're going to start all those folks at once, you're going to need to have a compelling hiring philosophy or sort of recruitment pitch in order to hire these 9 different folks to work. And so what are the ways that, what are some additional benefits that you can provide that will differentiate you, that'll make you be an employer where folks will want to work? And there was, the business plan did show that in that first year and then years going on, he was going to be having revenues and profits that would enable him to start adding benefits. So, and he was very concerned, like any business owner would be concerned, of wanting to make sure that he could add benefits that he could budget and sort of plan for. So we worked with him around starting a simple IRA where he could just put 2% per month for every employee of their salaries. And he was really surprised that, I can plan that, I can budget that. That's something that fits in my business plan. With healthcare, we focused again on options for that where he could budget. So a health reimbursement account where employees would allocate a certain amount of money per month and could select their own health plan. So as of the start of the new facility, he was providing then those 3 benefits, plus he increased the starting wage. He had originally thought he would start at $14 an hour to $19 an hour, which is just short of the living wage in York County. So, those are pretty straightforward conversations to have where you sort of sit down and speak with the small business owner over time. And I can talk about another example, but maybe later.
Yeah, possibly later.
The Q&A.
Running a bit short on time. There's just so much to dive into here. Tanya, could you tell us a bit about some of the benefits that Amazon is most proud of and kind of where you see innovation going forward?
Okay, such a great question, Shelley. There are so many that we're proud of. When we think about one of our leadership principles that we introduced in the summer of 21, it is scale and scope bring broad responsibility. And so we certainly have, there are other big employers I'm sure that you're aware of that offer health insurance, 401k with company match, life insurance and things like that, 20 weeks of paid leave for birthing parents, and even more leave options that we offer for adoptive parents and people that are choosing other things. One of the programs that we're very excited about is our upskilling program that's called Amazon Career Choice. And we really love that this is have been a pivot in our strategy over the past couple of years. We've offered this opportunity for our employees to upskill themselves to continue to grow within Amazon or elsewhere. So we believe in it. We offer prepaid. I heard that in your opening around this whole how it can be uncomfortable or it can be daunting to have to do reimbursement. So we offer prepaid college tuition for 4 and 2 year degrees. We also offer that for GED or industry certifications, even ESL. Whatever is the need of the employee is what we're offering and moving to with Amazon Career Choice. We have offered it since 2012, and over 175,000 employees globally have taken advantage of it. But what we're most excited about is that we have 750,000 employees here in the U.S. that are eligible for it. And the more that we can, through our app, nudge them, remind them of what's out there and the fact that it's prepaid and encourage them to use it, we're really optimistic again about how they're increasingly engaged in it. What this offers for our employees is access to over 400 universities or higher ed institutions, of which 231 of those are community colleges. So talking about investing in our communities, because that means a lot if we can encourage our constituents to, our community members to use our community colleges. So they're doing that. Last year alone, we had over 19,000 people actually engage in a 2-year program at a community college. So very excited about it. We do have a pledge when it comes to upskilling. We call it our Upskilling 2025 pledge, in which we're going to put in another $1.2 billion into that, because we do see a future where in that time period, we could have 300,000 more of our employees that get to participate. And just wanting to emphasize the point, we have the benefits that I mentioned in regards to medical, vision, and dental, but it goes beyond that because those benefits are available day one to our regular full-time employees. And so when you think about the number of people that get that, as opposed to having to wait, like many other employers require up to a 90-day waiting period to access mental health, 24 hours, 7 day a week, medical advice lines and things like that. So we offer that as a day one. Our career choice program is offered after 90 days of employment, but we are just continuing to push the needle there. I think the other thing that we're acknowledging is that we also have, in addition to regular full-time active employees, we have part-time and reduced employees. And so we have customized packages for those types of employees as well. So when the impact overall throughout our country, we have hundreds of thousands of employees that we know we have an obligation to provide some type of benefit offering that meets their priorities and their needs based on how they're choosing to engage with us.
Yeah, and building on that, Angie, and I'm combining a few of our questions here, just noting the time and wanting to make sure everybody gets home before the weather gets too much worse. But what have you seen to expand around the country to expand benefits towards your vision of everyone having access? And where it hasn't happened, what is it going to take to get there?
I'm going to answer the second question first. I think what it's going to take is acknowledging that our workforce has fundamentally changed from the first moments when we were writing laws around how to protect workers and basically inventing the definition of what the social compact is in our country. And so with a more mobile workforce, with technology that allows for app-based work, where there's a constant perpetual creative, or not creative, but tension and struggle around who's employee, who's not an employee, et cetera. All of those things we still have to resolve as a country. And we do want employers to take care of their workers. At the same time, we have to acknowledge that it's going to take everyone, companies like Amazon, large employers, coalitions, membership groups, intermediaries that also are in the interests of small business owners, which a lot of times they are really close to our hearts because we think of every single gig worker as a small business owner. And recognizing that in order to shift the paradigm of what's possible, we actually have to stop looking at what's possible through the lens of like who were enemies and who were friends, right? And so this dichotomy that we sort of sit outside of, where it's like unions versus employers, and where really we should all be talking about like what's just best for everyone, regardless of whether they're an employer or not. So we are looking to form alliances with people who represent small business owners, folks who might be working with contractors and issuing W-9 arrangements, et cetera, all the way to folks who are in survival economics, which is a term that Eat Chicago uses to talk about those who do earn income by recycling aluminum cans. Like there's this whole swath of our society that we really want to be talking about and protecting in a way that we're all working together, because these are people who we all know. So I think the possibility for having fresh conversations is only possible when we can all actually come together and not think of it as a zero-sum type of game. In terms of what's promising, I mean, I think state level experimentation, but I also think that we sit sometimes with legislators in California or New York or even at the federal level, and there is an acknowledgement, although we're not seeing it quite yet in terms of drafted legislation, but we are hearing an acknowledgement from people who are elected officials, et cetera, who are basically like, we're waiting for the opportunity to move forward on some ambitious experiments around how we can expand protections more broadly outside of just employment responsibility. That's exciting for us to hear. It's just been a really frankly awful time to introduce new and innovative things. But I think that pent up restlessness, as long as it continues to stay pent up and there is a workforce agitating for change, it will allow for things like the movement for basic income to start to expand to baby bonds and expanding earned income tax credits. Like there's a whole host of things that are kind of riding on those coattails right now to really shift the conversation and discourse of what's possible.
Yeah, thank you so much. And picking up on that thread of legislation, Emily, can you tell us a bit about what we're learning from some of the state and local policies that you've mentioned, as well as areas or things that are happening that might give you concern, and where your thoughts are there?
Yeah. On the promising side, 13 states and DC have passed paid family and medical leave. And again, 5 of those have happened since 2020. So there's a lot of energy and momentum there for the very good reason that these are really popular policies. People respond to them. They understand them. I mean, sometimes they're a little technical and complicated, but on a basic level, people know why it's important and what it means to be able to be paid when you have time off to have a baby or to deal with your serious health condition or to take care of a loved one. And the evidence shows that these policies are, in fact, making a huge difference for individuals by giving them that time and space. It means that, for example, new moms are less likely to have postpartum depression. It means that when you have a baby, if you have paid leave, you're more likely to go back to your employer at the end of that leave than if you have unpaid leave. And that is good for economic stability for employees. It's also really good for employers that these benefits are, in fact, doing what one would think they would do in reducing turnover and in creating, happier and thus more committed employees. Similarly, where we continue to see state by state finally expanding Medicaid, we see a huge range of benefits for individuals. They die less often. They are healthier. They can access basic health care. They also are more economically stable, which among other things means they're more likely to be able to have a car that gets them to work on time. They're more able to seek and keep a job. It also creates benefits for local economies as that expanded coverage both ensures that hospitals are better able to pay their bills because they're providing less uncompensated care. And more broadly, it creates stimulus effects in the local economy and helps create jobs. So I think that those are some examples of where we're seeing real success as promise. On the negative side, we've also seen a lot of states seeking to preempt local efforts to provide benefits, either through paid leave or through increasing the minimum wage or through flexible and stable scheduling protections. Sometimes states do that because they're providing state level protections. They just want one rule across the board. But a lot of states have done it in the absence of providing any state level protections. And so I think that's in part based on a fundamental misunderstanding that thinks it's somehow anti-business to create these benefits, which I think is just wrong. But it really demonstrates the need for federal baselines and for federal protections so that these efforts and these experimentations are not caught up in as much partisan back and forth state by state.
Great. Thank you. I think you've all kind of painted a picture of what is possible and how there's moments of promise that are happening in these different sectors. We have time for just a couple audience questions. Maybe we'll take one or two here in the room and then one or two from our virtual audience as well. Yeah, you in the gray sweater.
Hi, Peter Fugiel. I'm a postdoc researcher at Rutgers University. I have a question about the connection between benefits and operations. And we heard this a little bit with Betsy's example of offering paid time off during sort of slack seasons, the connection between operations and benefits. So seeing benefits not just as something extra that's offered to workers, but something that businesses need to think about in all aspects of how they produce their goods or services. And I'm going to focus on Amazon because, I've heard a number of Amazon workers, mainly in fulfillment centers, complain about mandatory overtime, chronically being required to work 50, 60 hours a week, week after week, without a lot of transparency, understanding about why or how long, those sorts of really grueling hours are going to continue. And so I'm wondering, in your conversations with colleagues, particularly on the operations side, have there been any changes, any ideas about, how do you deliver the hours that workers want and not overburden them with hours they don't want, recognizing, as you said, that this diverse workforce has different preferences, different needs when it comes to work hours?
Thank you for that question. I appreciate it because it is one of the things that we talk about a lot, and we don't just leave it to our colleagues in operations to solve for that. Being that we also happen to be a tech company, we are using our technology so that people can do more shift choice. They can put in the hours that they want. We've also done a macro view of our businesses. So it's a good problem to have that there's such high demand for our products that require us to all subscribe to, we're so customer obsessed. How do we get customers what they want at the speed at which they want it? From a macro perspective, we're looking at how can we leverage our geography and our scale better better so that we can find more ways using our technology and speed options to get things to people without overburdening any one city, any one locale. So when we look at our geographies and where we're seeing this overburdening, where we have a lot of, as you would call it, mandatory overtime, and quite frankly, what that means is in peak season, when it's during the holidays, we get a lot of orders because we're so relentless in wanting to deliver on those orders. It does sometimes impact geographies, and it puts a toll on those facilities. We're using our technology now to see how do we use our geographic footprint to get to different speeds, communicate with our customers, maybe different promise times, so that we can manage our customer obsession with our employee experience. That experience of working a lot of mandatory overtime can be tough. So maybe if a customer knows instead of getting it same day, getting it tomorrow, it may take 2 more days. And if they choose that option, that can help us to level off the overtime for our employees. It is a great opportunity. It's still a challenge for us, but we're leaning into it because we see this tension between being customer obsessed and being employee obsessed. And so our employee experience matters greatly, and we're going to continue to invest in getting that right. Thanks again for the question.
Yeah, and that fits into how benefits are one component of overall job quality. And conversations like this are important both to dive deep and also to think broadly about what overall a good job looks like. Let's just take one question from our online viewers as well. Finny, do you have one queued up?
I do. This question is from Timberly Russell, who asks, can the panel provide feedback as to what employers can offer to mitigate the benefit cliff, which is the experience in which a new employee loses their public benefits, such as Medicaid, SNAP, childcare voucher, etc.?
Do any of our panelists want to take that? Any ideas about things employers can do to mediate what's called a benefits cliff, folks losing public benefits as a result of gaining employment?
I mean, one of the things, I don't have an answer for what employers can necessarily do specifically, except that if more and more employers are part of the solution for how do we have large pooled funds, for instance, for those who are alternatively working, right, earning income elsewhere. Ideally, by definition, anyone can benefit from those types of safety nets. So imagine, if you will, if we had a place where you leave your employer, your COBRA runs out or whatever it might be that provides a certain degree of protection, and you still have access to maybe some gig work where that would qualify you for some kind of aggregate emergency savings that is pooled among others with your condition, right? So work condition. So those are kinds of things that help ameliorate some of the pressure on employers. Coming up with all of the solutions is, again, one way of trying to create a system that works for everyone.
Great. Thank you so much. And we are at time. I think we could spend several more hours engaging on these questions and many more. We invite folks in the room to stick around and chat with us a bit if you would like. And I'll just turn it back over to Maureen for some final notes.
Thank you all so much for a great conversation. Thank you, Shelley, Betsy, Tanya, Emily, and Angie. This was really fabulous. I kept thinking of that old phrase I attribute to Paul Wellstone while you guys were talking and all your examples. We all do better when we all do better. And I think you all gave great examples of that. So just another reminder on that we'll be on January 24th hosting The Alternative, How to Build a Just Economy, a book talk with Nick Romeo. Also, April 9th and 10th, we'll be hosting the Employee Ownership Ideas Forum with our colleagues at Rutgers Institute for the Study of Employee Ownership and Profit Sharing. So just something else to keep an eye out for. I really do want to thank all of my colleagues here at the Aspen Institute for all their work supporting this event. A lot of people do a lot of different roles, so you saw some of them around the room, so thank you so much to all of them. Please, again, just a reminder, please do take a moment to respond to our feedback survey. They're on the table outside, and they'll pop up when you leave your screen. So thank you for being here, and please join us again.